The world's three most powerful militaries, the US, Russia, and China, have all been expanding their nuclear testing sites in recent years.
Iran's nuclear program is still advancing at the speed of light.
Iran must face a credible nuclear threat.
Korean leader Kim Jong-un has kicked off 2024 with a dire warning to the U.S.
China may be accelerating its efforts to develop a nuclear arsenal. This is according to a new report released by the Pentagon.
Russia is revoking its ratification of a global nuclear test ban.
With a statement by a cabinet minister saying Israel could opt to drop an atomic bomb on Gaza is raising alarm.
Kim ordered his military leaders to, quote, thoroughly annihilate the U.S. and South Korea if provoked.
North Korea test-fired a long-range ballistic missile with the potential to hit the U.S.
The agency estimates that Iran maintains a total enriched uranium stockpile more than 20 times the allowable amount under the JCPOA.
It is no secret that we have become a nuclear threshold state, and this is a reality.
China is accelerating its nuclear weapons program.
China could soon be able to deploy a nuclear-tipped missile that U.S. defenses would find much harder to detect.
If he feels there is an attack from NATO, I suppose, on Russian territory, he reserves the right to use nuclear weapons in response.
So many hundreds of our missiles will appear in the air that not a single enemy will have a chance of survival.
I think we're getting closer than we ever have been in the modern times to the use of a nuclear weapon.
Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. Today on the channel, it's an honor to have Kai the radiation guy back again because I'm figuring with all the craziness going on in the world today, we got the North Koreans doing live fire drills on the border, we got the Middle East blowing up, the Ukrainians and the Russians are firing missiles back and forth. Things are getting crazy and I thought it was a very good time to have a nuclear physicist on the channel to explain to us why this particular Geiger counter, also known as a scintillator, and you're going to tell me the difference between those two things today, is one of the best in its class, and it's made right here in Canada. So thanks for coming out today.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Originally from Germany, my dad moved us here when I was like 15 because he was kind of worried about the political situation, the Cold War. And ever since then, I've been in Saskatoon basically, did my university here. I worked for the uranium mining companies for about 6 years, and I've been building radiation detectors for 20 some years.
So it's kind of symbolic that you were sent here because of the Cold War, and then you started building nuclear radiation detectors.
Well, I mean, the peace was nice while it lasted, wasn't it?
It was, yes. It is the exception, not the rule. Would you consider yourself a prepper?
It's a word. Okay, I'm aware I'm not as hardcore as you, but you know,
nobody is as hardcore as me.
I like having a little bit extra food in the house and a tank full of gas and whatever.
And you have the know-how, which is the most important. So the thing that makes this scintillator unique is that it was made for the purpose of nuclear disaster, like the nuclear disasters that we talk about on the channel. And there's a difference between this and the other devices that we typically see on Amazon, which a lot of companies are starting to take advantage of people's lack of knowledge of this particular subject area. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about why the Geiger counter that your company makes right here in Saskatoon is superior to those.
Yeah, so like Geiger counters are usually made for occupational exposure levels, which are fairly low. They're not SHTF levels, right? Mm-hmm. So if things were to go bad, you would turn one of these things on and it would just say 99. And just keep beeping, and that was it. Would be it. They would be overranging, or it would say overrange on the display.
So it would just be going off the charts everywhere you went.
Yeah, and they max out at somewhere between 1 millisievert an hour and 10 millisieverts an hour, which is really not a high level. Like I've worked in those kind of radiation levels, and I'm feeling just fine. You don't want to hang out there forever in a day, but for a short amount of time, it's no problem. You could have maybe 1,000 millisieverts per hour in a situation. I think like immediately downwind of the Bravo blast, I think they were at about 10 millisieverts an hour, which is about 1,000 rad per hour. It means that they max out at 1,000 times lower than what you could potentially see.
So they're not going to be able to distinguish much beyond, you know, if you're in a space which has higher radiation or low, it's just going to be registering off the charts for everything.
Be registering off the chart all the time. There's also what's called foldback, which means that's what Geiger counters do. After a certain point, when the radiation level gets higher and higher and higher, they actually start reading lower and lower and lower until they totally, you know, freeze up and read zero. Right. Now, you know, the brand name manufacturers have circuitry in there that will prevent that from happening, but I think if you buy something on AliExpress or Amazon, you kind of don't know if they're going to, you might be thinking, I'm walking in an area that's safer and safer and safer, when it's really you walking into the radiation rather than away from it.
If you guys missed the first video that we did, we explained the differences between alpha, beta, gamma. We do all the demonstrations, but I would encourage you to go and watch that first video as well, because if there's any gaps in your knowledge, that should fill them. What is the difference between a Geiger counter and a scintillator?
Geiger counters are built around Geiger tubes, and the way they work, you put 500 volts across the tube. It's a hollow tube that has some gas inside. When radiation hits it, it makes it conductive for a moment, current flows, and you count those pulses. What a scintillator is, it's a piece of solid material. When radiation hits it, it gives off a flash of light, and we have a little photosensor in here as well that counts these flashes of light.
So it's simpler, but it's also a little more complex, like it's more solid state.
It's more solid state, yeah. Like, you know, for example, this is a pancake Geiger tube, which has a very thin window here, so that, or it's a thin opening, so that it's sensitive to alpha particles. They're good to about 8,000 feet, but after that they'll pop, while the solid state will never pop on you.
Okay, so this is a bit more durable.
It's more durable that way, yeah. We have to keep the light out because it's essentially a photosensor that runs it, and that's why we have the silver foil over top of it, the very, very thin silver foil.
So that's the difference between a scintillator and a Geiger, but they both effectively do the same thing.
They both effectively do the same thing, but the big difference is, you know, the robustness, the ruggedness, and the measurement range.
Now that we got that out of the way, from here on in, we're calling it a scintillator. All right, so how does this scintillator work? Let's say I'm walking through the apocalypse, the bombs just went off, I should probably be in my bunker, but I'm an idiot, and I'm out looking for food, because my name's Normalcy Norman.
So it has different scales. It's on the counts per minute scale right now. For gamma radiation, you just push the button, and then you go into the microsievert an hour scale. That is actually the dose rate that you're getting, that your body is getting.
So that's in real time?
That's in real time, yeah.
This is emitting gamma radiation?
That's emitting gamma radiation right now, yeah.
Okay. So, and it's obviously picking that up, and that is 4 sieverts per hour?
That's 4 microsievert.
Microsievert.
Okay. So that's 4 millionth of a sievert. If this was 1,000,000 times more radioactive, we'd be in trouble.
Right.
Okay. But since it's not, we're just fine standing here.
And is there any other settings on it?
Those are the 2 main settings. You can cycle one more button and it will have the total counts displayed since we turned it on, and our total dose that we've got.
Since we turned it on.
Since we turned it on. So you want to limit your total dose, not necessarily the dose rate, but you limit your dose by limiting the dose rate, by getting out of the high dose areas.
So it's more important your overall dose in a period of time as opposed to...
Yeah, that's your damage. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So you can be in a fairly high dose rate environment as long as you're not spending a lot of time there.
So in a post-nuclear explosion, there's going to be radioactive particles everywhere. They're going to be emitting gamma, alpha, and beta radiation. We can't really do much about the gamma radiation, right? That's the whole idea with a nuclear explosion. I mean, you could protect yourself with earth.
Yeah, I mean, you can find the best spot in your basement, for example, where there could be a factor of 100 difference in your basement depending on where the fallout rolled off your roof, for example, right? You could have one corner that's pretty good and another corner, and in the middle of your basement could be pretty high.
And I think that's where something like this would come in very handy. And I think a lot of people, they think, well, I'm using this outside of a bunker, but this could be used primarily inside your space to know where the best place to sit is or whatever, you know.
I'm not an expert on nuclear weapons, but I think you had a guest on that said like your fallout, it decreases by a factor of a half every 6 hours or something like that. So if you're finding the safest spot for the first day,
right,
then you're ahead of the game already.
Could mean the difference between life and death potentially, or getting very ill.
Right, and you know, if you measure the radiation, and let's say you want to limit yourself to 1 sievert total exposure, and it's 1 sievert per hour radiation dose rate outside, you know, you can scoot out for 30 seconds to get Fluffy in, or to...
And you could see how contaminated Fluffy was.
But yeah, once you get Fluffy inside, then you put it on the counts per minute scale, you pull back the window, and that allows your alpha and beta radiation to penetrate in here, and so you can see if Fluffy is contaminated.
Okay.
If you need to wash her or shave her or whatever, right?
So do we have an example of that, of Fluffy on this table?
Okay, so our Fiesta ware here, that emits both alpha and beta and gamma. What we're seeing here is probably mostly beta and some alpha coming through here. So that would be what you would see on a contaminated pet, or your clothes as you ran out and got Fluffy. So that'll tell you, hey, do I need to change my clothes? Do I need to wash it? You know, the gamma radiation is the stuff that you're worried about getting it from afar. The beta radiation is the stuff that you're worried about getting inside you. Yeah. A good check is if your detector can pick up salt substitute, it will likely pick up nuclear fallout, because it's essentially the same stuff. It's a beta gamma mixture.
So that's a good test of your if you bought one of these off Amazon, to test and see, well, one aspect of it anyways.
So right now the meter is reading 100 counts per minute, while on background it's like 10 or 20, so we've got a factor of 5 to 10 increase above background.
Which is really not much.
It's not much, but what it tells us is that we are picking up this little bit of stuff.
Yeah.
There's no way...
So this has a huge range then, because that's picking up the smallest amount of radiation, but it also can pick up like that 100 sieverts or whatever you were saying.
Yeah. And it picks up the beta radiation. A lot of these things are just plain gamma, and you cannot use those to, you know, see if your cat got contaminated, or if your clothes are contaminated, or boots are contaminated, or food is contaminated.
So you ran a test on your device and you exposed it to radiation?
Yeah.
And so what did you find here?
So we have a really good range. Like this graph here goes from 20 microsieverts an hour to 80 million microsieverts an hour, which is 80 sieverts per hour, which is 8,000 rad per hour. Okay. So that's a good range. That is about 10 times higher than the fallout immediately downwind of the Bravo shot. And
the Castle Bravo nuclear test?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that this will cover all eventualities. This guy here, for example,
this is an old school.
That's what people use for in occupational settings.
Okay.
So that will tap out at 1 millisievert an hour.
And so it won't be very useful if you're in a very high radiation environment and you're just trying to get to a place that's less.
That's right. Yeah.
And what about this guy right here?
That'll max out even sooner. The pancakes, they're more sensitive. They can measure contamination while the gamma meters can't. But yeah, they'll max out at probably 10 times lower than this yet.
This is the app for this device. There's an app that makes this even easier to use, and it keeps a log of all of the findings of this little device. So if we were to go up and start detecting something, it would show you correspondingly in the app. So it just makes slightly better visuals. So if you're one of these people who's going to be clinging to their smartphones post SHTF, now you have a reason to do so.
But you don't need to use the app.
You don't need to use the app.
It's just fine standalone by itself, yeah. It logs the radiation level against the location, so people use it for gamma surveys and stuff like that. So it's reading 2,000 counts per minute on the top here while it's on the plate.
And it keeps a record of this. How long does it keep a record for?
Till you run out of memory on your phone.
Okay, wow. So we're not going to show the exact location, but it does bring up a map. So it'll tell you what the radiation was at a certain time and date at a certain place.
That's right.
So that's incredible. It's a really easy to use app, like it's really simple. If you're a technophobe and you don't like technology, this is the app for you. Not that you need the app, again, you don't really need the app, it's just a bonus, right?
So we'll open the box up. On the inside, it gives you some do's and don'ts. Let's open the shield from the side, not the back. Activate the shield from the side. You want to keep your fingers away from the sensitive window so you don't
want to puncture that. Yeah.
Keep your fingers away from the open window. Keep the window closed when you're walking around, just measuring the general environment, because you're not going to be seeing beta and alphas anyway. You're going to be seeing the ambient is just gamma.
I think we might have said this, but beta alpha, what is the distance that we're talking that it's going to pick it up at?
Yeah, so alpha, you're talking a few inches. Beta, you're talking about a few feet. And gamma, you're talking about hundreds of yards. Keep the unit away from water and dust. It's very difficult to make a detector that can detect alpha particles because it needs to have that thin window. So if you do need to use it in the rain, put it in a Ziploc bag, it's just fine. You won't get alpha, but you're not going to be looking for alpha particles in the rain. The last warning here is to remove the battery if you're not going to be using the device for a couple of weeks or whatever, because it's never really off. It just goes into sleep mode. So it does run down the batteries, and you don't want to have batteries leaking all over the place. In the case, you got a screwdriver to open the battery door, and then you've got everything inside a bag. If you do want to use the device in the rain, you can just put it inside the bag, keep the water out, and it still picks up your gamma radiation. It'll pick up beta radiation.
Now, there are certain bags that you can get that are more thick and ruggedized. Will it still work, or is there a certain limit to the
It'll still work. Like you won't be seeing alpha.
Okay.
You will be seeing beta. So if you want to use beta, what you can do is you open the slider and then you put it in.
Okay.
And you'll still pick up the beta.
Okay, yeah, and it's still registering
So it
there.
went now from,
it's not beeping because we turned the beeper off on the app, guys.
yeah. So it went from 10 counts per minute to 10,000 counts per minute on here. So it does not stop beta.
Yeah.
And even if you have a beefier bag, it'll still go through there. Beta will go through a few millimeters of plastic, essentially. You get 2 beads that you can use to check the instrument with.
Yeah, it's nice to have something to know that it works. That's one of my problems with the nuclear device is you just never know, is this thing going to work when the time comes, right? Because there's no way to test it.
Each bead should give you around 100 counts per minute, but that's a ballpark number. So if it gives you 65, whatever, it's still working. A very brief instruction card. There's a user manual, goes through the basics. It comes with 2 manuals. One is the user's manual, and the other one is an introduction to radiation.
Oh, perfect.
So it'll tell you like what's a safe level. It tells you a bit about the difference between alpha, beta, and gamma.
Yeah.
Kind of stuff that we talked about now, just a little bit more organized.
And it probably has the Canada guidelines for exposure levels.
It has some international guidelines.
Okay.
Yeah. And you get a calibration certificate. So each one of these is individually checked. They don't just fall off the end of an assembly line.
And so you get this little case too, which is an extra level of protection.
So when you open the case,
it's a pretty ruggedized little case.
You got the detector in here and the batteries outside, because like I said, you don't want to store the batteries inside.
It's really an incredibly lightweight device when you take the batteries out. Hey, like it's not going to take a whole lot of space in your bug out bag, and to power it off, you just long press, and it can take lithium. Doesn't matter as long as it's 1.5 volt AAA.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it'll self-test when it comes up. It'll give you a beep. It starts counting.
Okay.
And that's really all there is to this. Like I said, you don't need to connect it to the app. As soon as you put the batteries in, it'll start working.
So there is a limited availability with these. We make them here in Saskatoon, and like you said, they don't just roll off an assembly line. These are all individually checked. I think right now we just got a new batch, but they go super fast. So I would encourage you to get one. People are calling me from all around the world to get this device. So if you want one, make sure you pick one up as soon as possible, because they most certainly won't last. And I think we've kind of ramped up production a little bit, but you know, there's all kinds of bottlenecks in the supply chain and things are getting crazy. So I have a feeling that this might be the year that these things, we just can't keep them in stock.
I think as soon as something bad happens, they'll be gone, and I won't be able to get parts essentially.
Right.
These do go together a whole lot better than the previous model.
The previous model was a little bit heavier and it had like a slightly different shape. This is just more compact. They both did the same thing. So people who bought the last one, you still have the same device essentially.
I have the same device. The last one did not have the circuitry that made it go to like these insane high levels, like 8,000 rad per hour.
Okay.
They'll still be able to say, well, you're safer here than over there.
Right. And that's mainly what you want. That's 90% of it.
Yeah.
So
it won't give you a quantitative number as good as these ones.
Okay, fair enough. All right, well, thanks a lot for coming out and sharing all your knowledge. I would encourage people to go and check out the first video we did. We go into a lot more depth and it might fill in some of the blanks for you today. And if you have any questions about it, please post them in the comment section below, and our buddy Kai, the radiation guy, will hopefully stop by and answer those questions. But thanks for coming out, and let's hope that we can get through 2024 without